feel like in this role, you learn something from students every day. It's just a great atmosphere to come in and speak to people from all over the world, different cultures. I think it helps us become more rounded and more accepting of the world. We all want to be heard and understood. And although there's cultural differences, the difference between us as humans isn't different at all. Teaching English can hopefully narrow some of those gaps and bring down barriers.
If you could now meet the teacher that you were when you first started out, what advice would you give to yourself?
It does get easier with experience. You do find techniques that work for you. It becomes more rewarding once again. It's like going full circle back to when you first start to learn to be a teacher. I feel like that again now.
Hi Peter, how are you doing?
Hi, good, thank you, yeah.
Nice to see you. Could you, before we begin, tell us a little bit about the teaching context here?
Yeah, so in Lila, we have students from all over the world. So a lot of our classes are multilingual classes. It's very rare that we have monolingual classes. Primarily, it's adults that we teach, but in the summer we have a lot more young learner groups. Sometimes through the year we might have a closed young learner group for a short period, but mostly it's adults. Some students are here for long term. So it's obviously nice to see those progress and improve a lot. Some are here for short term, especially in the summer. We have a lot of people here for short term, 2, 3, 4 weeks. And yeah, it's just great to see lots of people from different countries, languages and cultures come, mix together, become friends, especially when they say things like, oh, if I didn't know English, if I hadn't learned so much, I wouldn't be able to communicate with my friends here. So that's really nice to see, especially when they go and do social program activities outside of the school as well. They can use what they've learned, and it's nice to see those photos of them enjoying themselves in Liverpool, and also the other trips they go on and using their English.
It's great to be involved in such a multicultural environment, isn't it? And I know that language schools like this one in the UK are very, very transient places, and quite often, as you've said, predominantly adult focused. But I know that you're a qualified and experienced primary school teacher as well. So what was it that inspired you to move into private language school sector and do the CELTA course and follow on from there?
Yeah, so teaching and learning is very important to me, and teaching in primary school is amazing. It's so rewarding, and that class is your class. You become like a parent to the children, but it is difficult as well. It does take a lot of your life, and because I was so interested in languages, I was studying Spanish myself. I'd learned a lot about that, and I thought this is a nice idea to teach English. Also, I wanted to continue my Spanish learning and thought I could combine the two. So I started the CELTA course. I'd spoken to a few people who'd done the CELTA course here before and recommended it to me. And I learned so much on the course, and I remember thinking at the time, these skills we're learning in this course, it's not only good for English teaching, it's good for teaching in general. And I remember thinking, if I ever go back to primary school teaching or teaching young learners, the skills I learned on it, like instruction checking questions in particular, I thought they'll be brilliant to implement. And it's what I've done the last few years, to use those skills across all of my teaching, not just English teaching. So yeah, I really fancy the new challenge of moving to a different country, practicing my Spanish in Spain, and learning how to become a better English teacher over there. And that's what brought on the career change, really.
Interesting to hear about those transferable teaching skills in such different contexts. Mm-hmm. Tell us a bit about your first experience in Spain then. What was that like?
It was very different to doing the CELTA here. I think the biggest difference for me is the times of working. Here we follow more of a typical 9 to 5 day. But in Spain, often you do morning classes, have a break, and then do evening classes, finishing at 9, 10 sometimes. And I found that difficult sometimes to adapt to. After a while, it became a bit more normal. But obviously a big difference here is we have the multilingual classes. In Spain, I had monolingual classes, and the city I was living in was a lot of university students, so a lot were coming and going. They might only be there for like a term and then not teach them anymore. Got used to there being very small classes or some big classes, people coming in at like 0 English and some being really advanced. I really thought it helped me hone my skills. Like, I always likened it to when you first learn to drive and you pass your test, but then you definitely learn a lot out on the road when you first start learning. And I think those stickers for a new driver are quite good, because you do learn a lot. And that's how my first year felt teaching English over there. I think I learned a lot about teaching grammar. And now that's probably one of my strengths in English teaching, breaking it down, knowing what works for me best, learning Spanish, the same with vocabulary, how I learn best, and that helps me teach the learners here. But also, once I came back, I felt like with that year under my belt, I had so much more experience, so much more knowledge, and I didn't feel out of my depth coming to work in language schools in Liverpool, where the teachers obviously had a lot more years experience. I think if I'd have gone into that without that experience in Spain, it would have been more difficult.
I think the newly qualified driver analogy is quite apt, isn't it? I've heard that before. And you've obviously got some variety of experience, including as a supply teacher, I believe. How does that differ from having your own class?
Massively, because it's like starting a new job every day, really. Sometimes you get the call in the morning to go to school. You've got to find your way there. Sometimes you might be rushing or a little bit late because the call's been late. And you're going into a classroom trying to project confidence, because children can smell any sign of uncertainty in a teacher. And all the work you do on planning over the years on teaching courses, it kind of goes out the window a little bit, because your job is a bit more classroom management, following a plan that's already been left, or bringing your own plans that you already have, so you kind of know what works well. So you've got to be really adaptable. You might teach different year groups within one day, or go to 5 different schools a week, and you don't have the same pressure in terms of marking or assessment, but it can be quite unsettling at times, moving around a lot. But you do learn a lot of skills, adaptability, working with new teams every day, making really good relationships with different schools. But then having your own class is a lot more rewarding, because you see those children or students progress throughout the year. Sometimes it can be very difficult at first, as you're getting to know your new students, what maybe special needs they have, or why something isn't working. But throughout the year, you find techniques that work for them better. And by the end of the year, when you see how much they've come on, it's really, really rewarding, not only in terms of the academic progress, but also the social progress, especially when the children are quite young.
It's a very fulfilling career, isn't it? Despite the challenges, I think that's what draws people to it and keeps us going through it as well. Mm-hmm. What about those particular teaching experiences in the primary context then? How have you been able to utilise those and apply them in the adult context here?
I think instructions are important, instruction checking questions. It's a bit different, because with the children, the native speakers, they know English already, but you're teaching them the opposite way, sort of how to spell, how to read the words that they already know. And then with teaching English, it's like the opposite. They might know how to read a word, but not understand what it means. So it's trying to apply that knowledge, but flip it a little bit. I think in both sides of teaching, I really like to break things down into simple steps and then apply it. So if you've broken the grammar down into steps, they practice that, and then maybe you can add in something else for them to apply to. So like how something might be, the pronunciation might be different in different parts, and then they can practice that, or how they might hear it out on the street as opposed to how they hear it on a listening, obviously depending on the level. But yeah, breaking things down into simple steps, simple chunks, and practicing them is what I've learned from both teaching.
Can you tell us something that you've learnt from your students?
I feel like in this role, you learn something from students every day. It's just a great atmosphere to come in and speak to people from all over the world, different cultures, see them learning from each other. But yeah, I mean, the amount of knowledge we gain from them. I like speaking activities that give opportunity for that. And you might find out how something is so different in a different culture. And they're also happy to learn about the different cultures. And I think it helps us become more rounded and more accepting of the world. It's something I then try to put forward in my own life to friends maybe who don't have the same experiences, that how basically we all want the same things as people. We all want to be heard and understood. And although there's cultural differences, the difference between us as humans isn't different at all. We're all wanting the same thing. And teaching English can hopefully narrow some of those gaps and bring down barriers. And that's what we see here in the school.
I think it definitely can. I think it's really great to be involved in an industry where cross-cultural collaboration brings so much value to everybody, and we're constantly learning from it and benefiting from it, I think, as well. Tell us what you would say has been your biggest personal challenge so far as a teacher.
I think as a new teacher, I definitely struggled with the workload and finding that work-life balance. Obviously, sometimes feeling stress from that. As I said, also, that feeling of starting a new job every day at the time on supply until I got used to it, that was a bit difficult to begin with. And then in terms of the English teaching, kind of getting used to different routines, working at different times of day. And then we had the pandemic as well, which we moved from in-person teaching to online teaching, which obviously was a challenge, but I felt like I adapted to it really well. Finding new teaching techniques online, how to display language differently, how to use the tools we had online for pronunciation. It was actually something I really got to grips with and enjoyed in the end, and it's something I've still been doing, teaching online up until early this year. Obviously, there's advantages in the classroom, but it doesn't mean you can't teach not in the classroom. People can learn from anywhere now, and that is a positive.
Is there anything that you've learnt to do in the online setting that you've subsequently been able to transfer to the classroom?
Yeah, some of the pronunciation, highlighting of where stress is, or things like elision, with dropping a sound off the end of a word. Sort of the way of showing that online, like making the word blank, the end of the word blank, and then highlighting it. I was able to put that into practice on the interactive whiteboard here. Some of the activities where we might go into breakout rooms, I've thought that was a good activity. I'll do that in class and just do different groups on different tables, or if need be, you can, if we've got enough space here at the time, we can break off into even different physical rooms to practice and then bring it back together.
What is it that keeps you motivated as a teacher?
I think that thirst for learning myself and the feeling you get from helping someone learn, because I know how important it is for me, and I'm constantly trying to learn more Spanish, and also I'm interested in things like psychology. So because I've got a thirst for learning, I like to help people who also do. And I think anyone coming here who has that real desire to learn English for whatever reason. It might be for work prospects, it might be for university, it might just be for personal. It's nice to really help them achieve the goals, and just that feeling you get when you see them learning and applying it in class. Also, working with primary school children, for me, the motivation there is to teach them skills that they really, really need, that are going to benefit them for the rest of their life, like reading, simple arithmetic, writing, and these days it's becoming coding as well. So skills that are going to benefit them for the rest of their life.
If you could now meet the teacher that you were when you first started out, what advice would you give to yourself?
I think definitely be kind to yourself and stick with it. Don't get too stressed or worried about the future and thinking it's really, really difficult. Stick with it and remember why you got into it in the first place, why it's important, what a rewarding job it is for yourself and for the students. Try to manage the workload and manage the stress, and also just to tell yourself that it does get easier with experience. You do find techniques that work for you, and it can even become more interesting again later on in the career, because when you learn more teaching techniques, it becomes more rewarding once again. It's like going full circle back to when you first start to learn to be a teacher. I feel like that again now.
I think there's probably a lot in there that teachers in various contexts can relate to.
Hello, I'm Matt Elman.
And I'm Cecilia Lemus-Harmer. We are part of the Professional Learning and Development team at Cambridge.
And we're here to give you a top tip about how to collect evidence of progress in your lessons.
So, Matt, tell me, what can teachers do to collect evidence of progress?
So first of all, I think we should be clear about what we're collecting. What do we mean by evidence of progress? And for me, the best way to describe this is to think about that sense that you have as a teacher of who in the class is doing well and who in the class is not doing so well. And usually, if you kind of think about a class that you've had, you have an idea, you have a picture in your mind of the students at the top and the students who are struggling, right? And you have that sense usually from what they're doing in the class, right? You just pick up on who's putting their hand up to answer questions, who is feeling confident, who's speaking confidently, who's writing confidently. And often there's a kind of a gap then in the middle. So you've got the top and the bottom, but then you've got this grey middle area. And the whole idea of collecting evidence of progress is to collect what you need to understand how all the learners in the class are doing, not just the ones at the top and the ones at the bottom.
And I think that it's also important to say that it's important that the teachers collect evidence of progress throughout the whole learning period and not just at the end point. Because if you only collect evidence of progress on a test or something at the end of the term, how are you going to be able to do?
You can't do anything about it, right? Yeah, definitely.
But one of the biggest challenges, I think, when I talk to teachers and when I'm teaching myself, I'm not teaching myself, but when I'm teaching, is what do you do when you have large classes? You know, lots of teachers have classes with 60, 70 students. And how do you do that?
Yeah, I mean, even if you have 30, it's a big ask.
How do you do it in a personalized way, like collecting evidence of... And I think it breaks down to you don't do all of them every lesson, but in your mind, you have like 4 or 5 students that I'm going to focus on and pay attention to how they're doing, what they're doing throughout the lesson. And I'll make notes or, take notes. And then that will be kind of collecting evidence throughout.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a note-taking aspect to it. And if you've got some kind of checklist, or if you've got all of the learners and their names written somewhere, and your success criteria and whether they've achieved them or not, then, you have something to support you doing that. I think it's also about questioning. And so often our understanding of how learners are doing is based on the questions that we ask. And you always get the confident learners raising their hands and answering questions. And sometimes it's about being more proactive and nominating the learners who are not putting their hands up so that you make sure you collect that understanding. Your learners need to feel like it's okay if they don't know the right answer.
Yeah.
That it's about exploring your understanding and helping you further your understanding. It's not about kind of making you feel bad if you get something wrong. If you don't know,
yeah. And that's our top tip for today.
Okay, it's time for the feature in this podcast called That Moment When. And I think you want to tell us about a particular student that you had who had no English or very little English when you first met him, but he went on to have great success.
Yeah, so I love it when students really try to apply the knowledge that they learn. And this student in particular joined, and he was in a very, very basic beginner class. I remember the first class we were doing was can and can't. And I had a group of 4, and he was picking it up a little bit better than the others. And he explained to some refugees in the class in Arabic to them that this is for can and this is for can't. And that helped them. But as he progressed up through to elementary and pre-intermediate, he always made the class and the other people feel at home, feel relaxed. And we always had a lot of humour in the class. He could apply humour to his English, whether it was a low level or not. So one day he came into class in the morning and said to me, I need to break Ramadan today because I'm going to see an apartment after class and I need to have energy to be able to speak. And he was searching for a word and he didn't know what, and eventually found it and said, I feel remorse. I said, okay, and explained the word to everyone. He came in the next day and said, Peter, I feel remorse again because I need to break Ramadan again because I need to go to look at another apartment. I said, oh, okay, well, I hope that's okay. And then he came in on the 3rd day and said, Peter, I'm breaking Ramadan for my hat trick. And because he knew about football, it was his little joke. And he said, so I feel a lot of remorse. But he was like that all the time. And I think sometimes teachers may have a tendency to prefer different levels. Some teachers are like, oh, I don't really like teaching advanced because the grammar might be difficult. I might make a mistake or something. Or some teachers might be like, oh, elementary is more difficult for me. But I think the students are what make it. And in that elementary class, every day there were laughs. The level of English they had, they were able to apply it and use it in humorous ways. And this student really made me proud because afterwards he went on to do a master's at university. So from coming with basically no English or very, very little to then maybe only 2 years down the line to complete a master's in something really difficult like cybersecurity or law or something, and then take that back now and have a good job in his own country. It made me really proud to think he started there and he was really happy in my classes.
I can understand why you're proud of your part in that. It's hugely impressive for somebody to be able to achieve that in a second language, let alone a first one. Yeah. And I'd like to imagine that the learning is deeper when there's laughter behind it as well, for sure. What part of your job are you most passionate about?
I think seeing people learn. And what I love about this language school in particular is that we give them skills to learn every day. You see real learning happening in English classrooms. Part of the CELTA course, you see that actually maybe recording things with pen and paper isn't the most important. It's the practical use of the skills rather than the actual learning taking place for the children. So I know here we definitely, there's real learning taking place in every lesson and the students have time to use those skills practically and then able to use them out in the wild, in the real world.
With your busy workload and other commitments, how do you manage your work-life balance?
So I think it's something that's difficult and something that I struggled with when I was a young teacher. And sometimes you can become stressed with that. And I'm someone who always feels like I don't have enough time in whatever I'm doing. So trying to learn over the years to be totally present in whatever I'm doing helps you feel like you've got more time because you're just focusing on the time that you have, whether that's in work or outside of work. Obviously, it's important to switch off. So I think what's good when you do have a lot of work to do is maybe you have a set time to do the work. So even if you're in work until 4 or 5 o'clock, maybe then you work until 6 o'clock and that's the cut-off point, even if not everything's ready. Because I found when I was in the primary school, I could come in super early or stay super late and still feel like maybe there was something else to do because you find other jobs to do. And one day I thought, I've been in for 2 hours before the kids come in. I feel tired and like I'm still in a rush. And I thought I could probably stay in all night and not sleep and still feel like this. So I think being strict with those time scales helps you fit in everything you need to do and then gives you time to switch off. And for me, switching off, I like to meet friends. I like to read in maybe a cafe. I like to go to the gym, which is really good for switching off. And I also do things like amateur acting classes. So meeting people, I think, is great to switch off from work and other commitments.
I'm pretty sure our learners benefit from our teachers being able to manage that effectively. Ready for some quick fire questions? What one thing could you not live without in your classroom?
Board pens, I think. Very often I go to the classroom, realise no pen, and you see me running back to go and get a pen.
Morning lessons or afternoon?
Morning, absolutely.
Digital resources or pen and paper?
I think both. I think you can be adaptable and use the benefits of both.
What is your go-to snack or drink during the teaching day?
Just water, to be honest. Constantly refilling my water bottle.
I reckon that's the healthy answer, isn't it? What's your worst teaching habit, Peter?
Maybe saying okay too much. Yeah. Is that okay?
It's okay. Thank you very much.
No problem. Been a pleasure.